We flash back to a scene from Caitlyn's childhood. She charges through a forest with a rifle, quickly but carefully shooting small wooden targets as metal arms thrust them into view, racing against Grayson to see who can be faster. Finally, she shoots the last target, but sees Grayson taking aim and holding her shot against the same one. Later, a party celebrates Caitlyn's victory, but she leaves her trophy on a set of stairs and confronts Grayson outside, asking if her parents paid Grayson to let her win. Grayson is coy at first, but admits that while she wasn't paid, she did let Caitlyn win, simply because she thought the child deserved it. She explains that, as an enforcer, learning to shoot allows her to protect people, which is reward enough, and asks Caitlyn what she's shooting for. Back in the present day, Caitlyn interrogates Vi, but Vi answers all of her questions sarcastically, giving her nothing. Frustrated, Caitlyn starts to leave, with Vi telling her to give Silco a kiss. Caitlyn returns, asking about Silco, but Vi remains obstinate. Hesitantly, Caitlyn steps over a red line on the ground, getting close enough that Vi can reach her through the metal bars. She shows Vi a picture of Jinx's monkey drawings from the crime scenes. Suddenly interested, Vi asks where Caitlyn got this. Caitlyn asks if inmate 2135 worked for Silco. Vi is incredulous that she didn't already know this, saying they all do. Caitlyn asks for proof, and Vi says she can get it, but not from within a jail cell. Caitlyn is reluctant to trust Vi and goes to leave. Later, she returns with orders from Jace for Vi's release. Marcus delivers a somber speech at the funeral of the 6 enforcers killed by Jinx. He and his daughter, Ren, also visit Grayson's grave. Later in Silco's office, Marcus furiously argues with Silco over the deaths of his enforcers. He wants to arrest Jinx, arguing that Silco can't control her. Silco instead suggests that he pins these crimes on the firelights. Marcus is reluctant to play along, but begrudgingly accepts. Jace goes through the Hexgate logs and finds far more discrepancies than he anticipated. Victor is wholly uninterested in Jace's politics and wants him to refocus on science, reminding him that the people who need their help can't wait. Marcus arrives, and Jace is aggressive in his push for Marcus to take this corruption seriously. Providing him with a list of suspicious transactions, Marcus tells him that the firelights are their chief suspect. Victor loses focus, coughing up blood as his vision becomes hazy. Jace asks if he's alright, but Victor brushes him off and returns to the lab. Jinx prepares a Hextech device based on Jace and Victor's notes, but as she activates it, it emits a powerful pulse of light and energy, somewhat resembling the explosion that killed her family. Unable to bear the painful reminder, she flees the device in tears. Caitlyn brings Vi to a train leading down into Zaun, but Vi says the train would be too risky. She begins leaping across rooftops, deftly free-running into the city below. Reluctantly, Caitlyn follows her, but isn't nearly as light on her feet, navigating the climb slowly and clumsily. On the ground, a pair of street thugs confront Vi, but she dispatches them before Caitlyn finally catches up with her. Vi dons one of the thugs' jackets and tosses the other's clothing to Caitlyn so that she can change out of her enforcer uniform. Back in the lab, Victor theorizes that Hextech can be made to learn and adapt rather than be bound to a single function. He tinkers with a levitating device covered in interchangeable runes, later referred to as the Hex Core. Jace asks if he's sure this is safe, to which Victor responds, "Of course not." Vi takes Caitlyn to a food stall run by a man named Jericho and voraciously wolfs down a bowl of cooked fish covered in sauce. She asks Vi what information Jericho can offer, but Vi reveals that she was simply hungry. However, Jericho slides Vi a napkin on which he's drawn a sigil. Vi takes the napkin and the pair depart. Jace and Mel attend a theater performance, sitting in a mezzanine box while a musician plays a unique-looking hybrid instrument. Mel warns Jace that by tightening security, he's made himself an enemy of various merchants, including the other counselors who had previously been able to use their wealth and influence to break certain trade laws with impunity. Jinx revisits the abandoned arcade from her childhood, which appears to have remained untouched in the years since her last visit. She restores a punching machine whose scoreboard is covered in V's name. Memories of her sister bubble to the surface once again as she furiously takes out her frustration on the machine. At last, her name appears second on the scoreboard, just short of Vi's high score. Vi sees that the last drop has been taken over by Silco and is moved to anger. Caitlyn remarks on how shady the place looks, but Vi rebuts her, saying, "You don't know anything." Back at the theater, Jace is reluctant to compromise the safety of the Hex Gates for what he views as the other counselors' corruption. but Mel assures him that he'd simply be doing favors amongst friends, and as a symbol of the future, he has the potential to shape his own destiny. Amara, one of the merchants he inadvertently crossed, arrives at Mel and Jace's box, bemoaning how she'd been confronted by enforcers that morning. Mel assures her that Jace is willing to reinstate former trade privileges to those who share his vision. Finally, Jace plays along, striking a deal with Amara. Jace agrees to restore her trade privileges as Mel suggested, and further entices Amara with exclusive perks from his Hextech enterprise as a partner in exchange for her financial and political support. One by one, he visits the other counselors, except Heimerdinger, in their boxes, making similar arrangements with each one, much to Mel's pleasure. Vi and Caitlin visit a brothel whose door is marked with the sigil given to them by Jericho. Caitlin, clearly out of her element, asks Vi what her plan is. Vi suggests Caitlin pretend to be a prostitute, but Caitlin scoffs at the idea. Vi advises her that the way to make people talk to her is to act like you have what they want. Caitlin asks what she has, to which Vi responds, "You're hot, Cupcake." She grabs a patron by the arm, who introduces himself as Pim, and leaves him to mingle with Caitlin. She enters the office of the brothel's Madame Babette, who is shocked to see her. Marcus visits Silco's office, warning him that Jace is now a counselor and is on the path to discovering Marcus and Silco's relationship. Silco offers him one of Jinx's grenades, suggesting he pass it off as proof of the Firelight's guilt. Marcus laments that this has gone too far and imagines himself pulling the grenade's pin, killing himself and Silco. Silco dares him to do it, but in the end, he simply walks away. Silco tells Jinx, who is once again listening from the rafters, that she needs to weaponize Hextech soon. Jinx asserts that she is unable due to her trauma association with the Hex Crystal, but Silco is insistent. Babette tells Vi that no one has been able to stop Silco since Vander's death. Vi asks about Powder, but Babette knows nothing. However, she reveals that Sevica is a regular at the brothel and offers to have one of her staff, Miguel, tell Vi where to find her. As Vi leaves the brothel, she sees Caitlin chatting with another patron, looking far more comfortable and relaxed than when she arrived. Mel commends Jace for his work at the theater, and they fondly discuss the future of Hextech. Suddenly, Mel kisses him. Meanwhile, Victor continues experimenting with the Hex core, unable to figure out why it isn't working. His assistant, Sky, offers to walk him home, but he rejects her, saying he's going to sleep in the lab tonight. He resumes his work, eventually getting frustrated and throwing his notes in the air. At that moment, his vision becomes hazy once again, and he coughs blood onto the table. Mel and Jace go to bed together. Victor collapses, unconscious, as his blood reacts to the Hex core. It begins pulling towards the core until a single drop levitates off the table and begins weaving itself into the fabric of the device. All the while, Mel and Jace have sex. Silco takes Jinx to the waters where Vander tried to drown him. He explains that he let a weak man die on that day, and a new one was reborn. If Jinx wishes to overcome her pain, he says, she needs to let Powder die. He tells her to be strong, saying that Jinx is perfect. Finally, he submerges her in the river as if baptizing her. Vi finds Sevica gambling over a game of cards. Marcus ponders the grenade given to him by Silco, alongside a framed drawing by his daughter. Enraged, he shatters his drink. Mel wakes up alone, realizing that Jace is gone. Jace sits next to a hospital bed, where Victor lies unconscious. As Victor wakes up, Jace struggles to explain what the doctors told him. Victor fills in the gaps, asking how much time he has left. Vi interrupts Sevica's card game with a knee to the face. Sevica's opponents grab a handful of coins and run. Sevica removes her cloak, revealing a mechanical prosthetic arm, able to inject her with shimmer on command. They fight relentlessly, Vi eventually pinning Sevica to the ground. She asks where her sister is, and Sevica says that Jinx works for Silco now. This shocks Vi enough for her to let her guard down momentarily, and Sevica stabs her in the gut with knife-like mechanical fingers. She's about to kill Vi, but takes a shot to the shoulder from Caitlin's rifle and flees. Caitlin helps Vi to her feet and the two hobble away. Jinx finally solves Hextech, creating a machine similar to the one Jace built when he first unlocked its potential. A wounded Sevica shuffles back to Silco's office, leaking shimmer on the floor. She tells Silco that Vi is back. Silco is dumbfounded, having believed the girl was dead. We flash back to a scene from Victor's childhood. While other children swim in the water, Victor winds up a mechanical toy boat. He is seen briefly by Sky, but the girl soon returns to playing with the other kids. Victor sets the boat in the water, and it begins sailing downstream. As it picks up speed with the current, Victor is unable to keep up with it due to his bad leg. It descends into a cave, but Victor follows it. When it finally comes to rest, it is found by Singed, who is sitting in the cave with his pet wave rider, Rio. Victor inquires about the creature, and Singed explains that Rio is a rare mutation he cultivated, and that while she is dying, he is working to save her. Victor offers to help, and Singed accepts. Back in the present day, Victor sits on a ledge overlooking the same pool of water from his youth. Heimerdinger approaches, remembering the day he first met Victor here, and offers his condolences for Victor's prognosis. Victor expresses envy for the professor's long and remarkable life. Heimerdinger tells him that he should be proud of his accomplishments, but Victor believes his work will be short-lived. Jace walks in on Null painting a picture of the immortal Bastion from her home nation of Noxus. He apologizes for disappearing the previous night, but she remains irate. After a moment, he breaks the news that Victor is dying. He theorizes that his illness is due to the gases he was exposed to while living in Zaun, lamenting that he wants to solve real issues, not just trade disputes, and hates feeling so useless. Mel admits that she's in exile from her family, having fallen short of Medarda's standards. She tells Jace that he should be with Victor, saying that while we can't change fate, we don't have to face it alone. Victor stares endlessly, pondering the hex core. He begins to notice how it's changed after absorbing his blood. He touches it with his finger, and it reacts violently, causing his consciousness to slip once again. Jinx visits the bar at the last drop. The bartender, Therum, seems terrified of her, but pours her a drink as she pries him for information. He reveals that Silco's henchmen are searching for 2 women who did a number on Sevika. Jinx thanks him by attaching a grenade to his back, though it only explodes in glitter. Caitlyn and Vi continue to elude the henchmen, but Vi can barely walk due to her wound. They come to the edge of a cliffside with an abandoned water tower situated at the bottom, metal supports reaching all the way up the rock wall. Vi jumps across the beams to reach the bottom, though her condition makes her sloppy. Caitlyn follows slowly. Standing on a distant structure, the Firelight leader sees them descend. A group of henchmen sprint past the water tower, not thinking to check the hiding place below. Sevika enters Silco's office, saying, "We lost her." The chair swivels around to reveal Jinx in Silco's seat, and she asks who they lost. Sevika steps forward, stumbling into a tripwire and releasing a noxious green gas. Jinx dons a gas mask as Sevika attempts to reach her, but passes out. Sometime later, Jinx slaps her awake. She's tied down to Silco's chair. Jinx subtly threatens to cut off her remaining arm, but Sevika is unfazed. She explains that Vi is back in town alongside an enforcer, claiming that it's only a matter of time before Jinx implodes and Silco gets the message that she's unreliable. Jinx feigns crying but sneezes in Sevika's face, exclaiming that she knows just how to deliver that message. Marcus returns home and goes to check on his daughter, Ren. He finds her building a tower of blocks with Silco and 2 of his thugs. Silco reveals that Vi is loose in Zaun with an enforcer. He had been under the impression that Marcus killed her, not locked her in prison. Marcus identifies the enforcer as Caitlyn and promises to fix this. Though it goes unspoken, all adults in the room are aware that Silco means to harm Ren if Marcus fails him. Silco misplaces a block, bringing the tower tumbling down, unconvincingly pretending it was an accident. Victor demonstrates to Jace that the hex core responds to organic matter, causing a small plant to experience massive growth, multiplying in size in a matter of seconds. Victor theorizes that the hex core could lead to healing magic, which could augment physiology and extend life. Jace surmises that it may be the key to saving Victor's life, but the plant withers and dies moments later. Victor explains that he's had the same result with every plant he's tried, but doesn't know why. He fears he may be running out of time. Trying to remain hopeful, Jace offers to ask Heimerdinger for help. Caitlyn helps Vi to her feet. They stand before a large encampment of vagrants, all of whom appear malnourished or deformed, shying away from Caitlyn's flashlight. They turn away, retreating into the house at the base of the water tower. Caitlyn helps Vi onto a bench and reaches to dab her face with a handkerchief, but Vi swats her away. Vi is fading and begins to see visions of her childhood, when she and Powder lived in this house with their parents. Caitlyn wants Vi to trust her, not seeming to understand why she hates Piltover so much. Eventually, Vi allows Caitlyn to stem her still bleeding wound with a handkerchief. Victor and Jace introduce Heimerdinger to the hex core. They explain its various functions, but Heimerdinger is distracted. He says that he's seen nations destroyed by arcane forces which looked exactly like this, and insists that the Hex Core be destroyed. Jace vehemently opposes him, saying that the Hex Core could save Victor's life. Heimerdinger claims that this is a violation of the ethos and vows to have it destroyed one way or another, storming away in anger. Victor says he knows someone else who could help, but Jace says he needs to get ready, to which Victor asks, for what? Vi starts to lose consciousness entirely. Caitlin exits the house but is startled to find Huck standing there, asking if Vi is alright. Caitlin trains her rifle on Huck, but he assures her that he's a friend, owing his life to Vi's father. Caitlin tells him that Vi needs a doctor. Huck explains that doctors are scarce around here, but he may know someone who can help. He beckons Caitlin to follow him into the camp, where they arrive at an apothecary's stall. Huck explains that the apothecary makes potions to help with this, shamefully gesturing to the deformed purple growths on his body caused by the overuse of shimmer. The apothecary brings forth a potion, asking for a trade. Caitlin empties the bullets from her rifle and passes it to the woman. In response, she adds a single drop of shimmer to the potion and slides it to Caitlin. Caitlin invites Huck to meet Vi, but Huck doesn't want Vi to see him like this. She embraces him in a hug before returning to the house. Marcus gives Jinx's grenade to Jace, falsely stating that he found it on one of the firelights and that he has reason to expect more attacks, though he's unsure how to stop them aside from searching everyone who crosses the bridges. Jace says that that's exactly what they'll do. Marcus is hesitant, but Jace insists. He also inquires about the prisoner Caitlin released on Jace's order, asking if there's anything he can help with, but Jace dismisses him, saying he's got it covered. Later, at a council meeting, Heimerdinger waxes poetic on how Piltover has lost its way, saying that greed and complacence have divided the once united city. He urges the councilors to hold each other accountable, but Jace retorts by asking who will hold Heimerdinger accountable. He berates the professor for failing to contain shimmer and violence in the Undercity, accusing him of obstructing others' plans, but never formulating his own. He continuously attacks the professor until at last, he moves that Heimerdinger be expelled from the council. Such a motion must be unanimous, but in the end, every other councilor supports Jace's proposal. Heimerdinger appears incredibly hurt and betrayed as his days on the council come to a halt. Caitlin feeds the potion to a barely conscious Vi. She screams awake, eyes briefly turning purple from the shimmer, and notices that her wound has stopped bleeding almost immediately. Caitlin refocuses on finding Jinx, the name given to Vi by Sebika. She leans against a support beam, but quickly stands up straight as the entire tower creaks unsteadily. She notices that the beam is marked with various heights labeled Violet and Powder, realizing that Vi used to live here. She asks who Powder is, and Vi explains that it's her sister whom she needs to find. The conversation leads to Vi revealing that her parents were killed by enforcers. A commotion stirs, prompting Vi and Caitlin to follow the noise outside. Silco is standing there with his thugs, holding vials of shimmer over a small crowd of vagrants. He drops the vials, leading the addicts to imbibe the drug voraciously. They begin to transform, marching towards Vi mindlessly. Caitlin starts pushing on the support beam in an attempt to bring the water tower down. Vi promises to save her sister and destroy Silco's empire, turning to slam her fist into the beam, finally beginning the tower's collapse. From atop a distant tower in Zaun, Jinx holds the flare that Vi gave her when she was a child. She ignites it, sending blue smoke skyward, determined to attract Vi's attention. Vi and Caitlin escape in the chaos as the water tower falls apart. Enraged, Silco sends his henchmen after them and kicks Huck into the dirt until he stops moving. Vi and Caitlin re-enter the city proper, and Vi spots Jinx's plume of smoke. Marcus erects a blockade upon every bridge between Piltover and Zaun, illuminated by floodlights, with the intent of searching all who pass. Back in Victor's childhood, the boy arrives at Singe's lab with a crate full of flowers to feed Rio. However, he finds Rio in severe pain, flailing on the ground, her body hooked up to a series of tubes. He embraces Rio in empathy, horrified at what Singed has done. Singe says he thought Victor understood, and that the mutation must survive. Disgusted, Victor absconds, trampling over the flowers as he goes. Returning once more to the present day, Singed has contained Rio within a massive glass jar full of green liquid, her unmoving body still connected to various tubes. An adult Victor limps into Singe's lab, saying, "I understand now." Singe turns to face him, his visage scarred and burnt by the fire set by Powder all those years ago. Silco retreats to his office, venting about how many problems one girl can cause. He sees a dagger stuck in his desk. On it, an arrow pointing upward, drawn in crayon. He looks up. Dangling from the ceiling is Sevika's unconscious body, vandalized with crude graffiti, including the word liar numerous times. Eventually, Jinx's flare burns out, prompting her to angrily throw it to the ground below as she examines her stolen hex crystal. Finally, Vi arrives. Reunited at last, the sisters embrace in tears. The crystal slips from Jinx's grasp and clatters to the floor. She tells Vi that she's changed since Vi left, but Vi assures her that she still loves her deeply. Caitlyn catches up a moment later, prompting Jinx to draw Pow Pow pointed at Caitlyn. Jinx realizes that Sevika wasn't lying about Vi being with an enforcer, while Caitlyn sees the crystal and realizes that Vi's sister is Jinx. Vi attempts to calm both parties down, but Jinx becomes hostile, surmising that Vi is playing a cruel trick. Vi continuously refers to her sister as Powder, causing her to angrily assert that her name is Jinx now. She accuses Vi of manipulating her in order to obtain the hex crystal, but Vi insists she doesn't even recognize the gemstone. Jinx hears a strange noise in the distance, and suddenly, the firelights appear. Jinx opens fire on the masked hoverboarders, with Vi covering her back and fighting to fend them off. Caitlyn seizes the hex crystal before it can roll off the tower, but is then knocked unconscious by a firelight. As the battle continues, Vi is disturbed at how unhinged and violent her sister has become, and while Vi is distracted, a firelight knocks her out as well. Another firelight slashes at Jinx's leg, leaving a gash. Finally, the gangsters deploy a smoke bomb and disappear with Caitlyn and Vi. Having lost her sister once again, Jinx cries out in agony. Caitlyn and Vi wake up handcuffed to metal pipes and blinded by burlap sacks over their heads. They argue briefly until someone enters the room and takes Vi away, leaving Caitlyn alone. One of the firelights removes the sack from Vi's head and leaves her alone with the gang's leader. The leader removes his mask, revealing himself to be Echo. Echo explains that he thought Vi was dead and begins to question her, still unsure if he can trust her. Vi is adamant that she knows nothing about the Hextech gemstone and that she isn't working for Silco. Eventually, she shirks off her handcuffs and embraces Echo in a hug, saying that she missed him. After realizing that she's still the same Vi used to know, Echo reciprocates, shedding a single tear as he does. After examining Victor's research, Singed offers him a vial containing a variant of Shimmer, which he claims will allow him to survive a violent transition. However, he warns Victor that taking this path will cause the Topsitters to despise him, revealing that he parted ways with Heimerdinger for similar reasons. Victor takes the Shimmer, telling himself that Jace will understand. Jace is hard at work at the forge when Mel approaches him. He shows her the grenade given to him by Marcus, showing disbelief at the quality of its engineering. He also expresses guilt for having betrayed his former mentor, Heimerdinger, but Mel assures him that he did the right thing. Sevika informs Silco that Marcus has shut down the border between Piltover and Zaun, and that the Chem Barons have called for an assembly. Silco says he needs to find Jinx, but Sevika suggests that she'll reappear when she's ready. Jinx returns to her workshop and begins stitching the gash in her leg while arguing with the voice of Milo in her head. Milo berates her, but Jinx tries to stay positive, telling herself that Vi came back for her, not the crystal. Echo introduces Vi to his new home, a small sequestered settlement centered around a massive tree, a rare sight in Zaun. He explains that the settlement has become a refuge for victims of Shimmer. He shows Vi a large painted mural commemorating their dead. It prominently features Violet, Powder, Milo, Clagger, Vander, Benzo, and numerous others. Someone is in the process of adding the pink-haired girl that reminded Jinx of Violet. Echo tries to convince Vi that Powder is gone and that Jinx can't be saved, but Vi refuses to give up on her sister. A riot has broken out at the border, with enforcers struggling to hold the line. Victor sits on the Piltover side, and Jace arrives on Marcus's notice. Jace admonishes Victor for the optics of his own partner violating the blockade, but Victor is baffled that Jace is the one who ordered it. Victor explains that he was visiting Zaun in search of someone he knew who could help save his life. Jace asserts that people from the Undercity are dangerous, but Victor angrily reminds him that he's from the Undercity. He also lies, saying that this friend of his was unable to offer any assistance. The Chem Barons hold their assembly. Finn, Smeech, Cross, Rennie, and Marga. Finn bemoans that with the border shut down, the Barons are bleeding money, and he decries Silco for losing control. Finally, Silco arrives with Sevika. Finn and the others question him, suggesting that they cut a deal with Topsiders and return the gemstone. In response, Sevika dons a gas mask, turns off the ceiling fan, and drops a metal tank which begins filling the room with an invisible gas. The other Barons begin coughing and choking, but Silco seems immune to its effects as he distributes gas masks to everyone except Finn. He lectures the Barons, reminding them that the Undercity had nothing before he gave them a taste of Topside. Eventually, Finn collapses on the floor, begging Silco for the final mask. Silco takes a deep breath through the mask before finally bequeathing it to Finn. At last, Sevika restarts the ceiling fan and swings the doors open, airing out the room. Having made his point, Silco takes his leave. Alora brings a letter to Mel, and Mel instantly recognizes the binding wax seal as her family crest. A masked child removes Caitlyn's restraints and offers her a bowl of water, but she swats it from the child's hand. Echo, sitting in the doorway, dismisses the child. Caitlyn begins to negotiate for Vi's release, but Vi appears behind Echo, free and unharmed. Echo explains that Vi has vouched for Caitlyn, and so he'll allow her to return to Piltover. Jinx reappears before Silco, seizing the device he uses to inject shimmer into his deformed eye. She confronts him for lying about Vi, using the needle to create tiny stab wounds across his face. Silco claims he only wanted to protect Jinx, accusing Vi of returning only for the crystal, not for her sister. He reminds Jinx that he found her and gave her a home after Vi left her. Visibly distressed, Jinx finally uses the device for its intended purposes, injecting Silco's eye with shimmer and storming out of the room. Echo and Caitlyn get into a heated argument. Echo claims that Silco pays the enforcers to hunt his people like animals, but Caitlyn doesn't believe it. He confronts her about the gemstone, and she explains its purpose, that it can be used to build any hextech device. Echo wants to use it to fight back against Silco, but Caitlyn believes she can bring an end to the conflict if she can present the crystal to Jace and the Council. After some convincing, Echo agrees on one condition, that he deliver the crystal himself. Victor carefully dismantles Jinx's grenade. Mel theorizes that someone in Zaun may be weaponizing hextech and suggests that Jace and Victor build their own weapons. Victor passionately rejects the idea, arguing that they invented hextech to improve lives, not to take them. Jace, however, is conflicted. In his distress, Victor nearly sets off the grenade, but cuts a wire and deactivates it. Heimerdinger dons a cloak and sails across the river to Zaun. Echo says his goodbyes to the Firelights and leaves along with Vi and Caitlyn. They see a swarm of insects which glow with an eerie green light. Vi tells Caitlyn, who has never seen them before, that the creatures are called Firelights. Jace discovers a drawing he made as a child, depicting himself as a hero wielding a large mechanical hammer. He hugs his mother, lamenting that he may have to do something he never thought he would. Victor retrieves the vial of shimmer he received from Singed, hidden in the handle of his crutch. He carves runes into his leg brace as well as his own skin. Finally, he injects himself with the drug and cuts open his hand, feeding his blood to the hex core. He screams in pain as shimmer and magic infuse into his bloodstream, beginning a violent transition. Echo, Vi, and Caitlyn begin to cross the Bridge of Progress back to Piltover, but Vi stops. She says that she needs to go back for her sister and leaves Echo and Caitlyn to go ahead without her. Jinx is perched high upon the bridge's supports, watching them with great interest through a spyglass. Echo and Caitlyn encounter the blockade, enforcers commanding them to halt. Caitlyn sees Marcus and flashes her badge, saying she has proof that Silco is behind everything. Not seeing any other option, Echo brandishes the canister containing the gemstone. Marcus steps forward and shoots Echo in the torso, training his pistol on Caitlyn and picking up the canister as the boy collapses. Hearing the gunshot, Vi doubles back to rejoin her friends. Marcus seems to struggle internally, knowing he needs to kill Caitlyn to protect himself, but appearing unable to do so. Mysteriously, a swarm of firelights descends on the scene. Closer inspection reveals that the insects are mechanical replicas, and without warning, they explode, wreaking havoc on the blockade. Jinx arrives in the wake of the false firelights, which were apparently by her design. With her shock pistol, she executes a struggling enforcer. Many others lay dead. Caitlyn attempts to stand, but her leg is wounded. Marcus begins to speak and dies mid-sentence. Vi rushes to Caitlyn's side and helps her to her feet. Jinx retrieves the canister and slings it over her shoulder. Upon seeing Vi and Caitlyn, she is enraged, believing Caitlyn to be a corrupting influence bent on turning Vi against her. She fires Pow Pow at the pair, forcing them to jump out of the way. Echo appears on his hoverboard, having survived Marcus's shot via a metal plate hidden under his clothes. He knocks the minigun out of Jinx's hands and steals back the canister, throwing it to Vi and Caitlyn and telling them to go. Reluctantly, the pair shuffle away, leaving Echo behind to fight Jinx. Jinx fires her shock pistol, but Echo remembers a game he played with Powder when they were kids and uses it to predict and dodge Jinx's shots. He tackles her, pins her to the ground, and beats her viciously. However, seeing Jinx's bloodied nose and frightened expression causes him to momentarily hesitate, taking pity on the girl he once knew. Jinx takes the opportunity to pull a grenade's pin. Both of them are engulfed in the resulting explosion. We flash back to a scene from Mel's childhood. She stands amidst the wreckage of a crumbling throne room. Her mother, Ambessa, joins Mel in the room and begins lecturing her, extolling the virtues of war. Moments later, 2 Noxian guards enter, escorting a young woman as their prisoner, apparently a member of the newly dismantled royalty. Mel encourages her mother to show mercy, but Ambessa beheads the prisoner with one swipe of her blade. Back in the present day, Mel awakes from the apparent dream, startled by the painful memory. Above her bed is a large painting of the prisoner's necklace on the ground and covered in blood. She sees Jace next to her, still asleep. Caitlyn and Vi make their way back into Piltover, evading squads of enforcers as the police rush to the Bridge of Progress. Caitlyn opens the canister and realizes that the Hex Crystal is missing. Silco arrives at the bridge, sees Jinx's body lying amongst the wreckage. He rushes to her side, finding the Hex Crystal in her limp hand. He carries her back to Zaun. That morning, Jace and Mel arrive at the Bridge of Progress. Upon seeing the enforcers' many corpses, Jace vomits into the water below. While bent down, he sees the remnants of one of the mechanical firelights. Vi and Caitlyn sneak into the latter's bedroom through the window. Mrs. Karaman kicks the door down, pointing a rifle at the pair as if she were expecting intruders, but is surprised to find Caitlyn instead. Mr. Karaman embraces his daughter, relieved to see her safe. Mrs. Karaman asks to speak to Caitlyn in private. Mr. Karaman begins to remove the shrapnel from Caitlyn's leg. Mrs. Karaman reprimands Caitlyn for her recklessness, but Caitlyn admonishes her mother, a counselor, for her role in creating the squalid conditions she witnessed in Zaun. After some convincing, Mrs. Karaman agrees to allow Caitlyn and Vi to make their case before the council. Silco bursts into Singe's lab carrying Jinx, still unconscious, and they strap her down to an operating table. Singe claims that he can save her, but that the process will be demanding. Silco assures him that Jinx can handle it, and implores him not to let her die. Singe surprises Silco with a syringe to the neck, anesthetizing Silco for the sake of his sanity. As Silco fades, Singe claims that he too once had a daughter. Sevica is sitting alone in the last drop, drinking and repairing her prosthetic arm. Finn sits across from her and strikes up a conversation. He expresses disappointment in Silco's performance and asks her to consider turning against him. Sevica is resistant to the idea, but Finn leaves her to think about it. Ambessa arrives in Piltover on a Noxian ship, accompanied by a host of soldiers. Mel and Alora meet her as she deboards. Ambessa attempts to frame her arrival as an innocent family visit. But Mel is suspicious of her mother and still harbors anger since Ambessa banished her over a decade prior. Ambessa informs her that Mel's brother, Kino, is dead, having crossed the wrong man. She reveals her ulterior motive. She wants her hands on Hextech weaponry, but Mel refuses to oblige. A young male escort arrives, and Ambessa departs at his side. Caitlyn returns to her bedroom, where Vi had been waiting, and informs her that they'll present their case to council that night. Vi laments on how badly she misses her younger sister and expresses regret for failing her, while Caitlyn simply listens intently. Jinx wakes up in Singe's lab, racked by incredible pain. Singe injects her with Shimmer, and Jinx begins to see vivid hallucinations of Vi, herself, and Caitlyn. In the visions, Vi betrays Jinx and replaces her with Caitlyn. Singe remarks that the pain will only get worse, and Jinx conflates him with the image of Caitlyn. She screams in agony. Later, Silco comes to his senses. He groggily examines Jinx's operation table. The girl is gone, but the table is still covered in dirt and blood. He holds the scalpel to Singe's neck, asking what he did to her. Singe replies that he saved her life. A cloaked Heimerdinger walks through the streets of Zaun, taking in the depth of the city's poverty and violence. A young child approaches and gives him a handful of nuts and bolts as a gift. Hoping to impress her, Heimerdinger performs a sleight of hand trick to magically replace the scrap metal with a spinning top. However, the girl's mother angrily takes her away from the stranger. He returns to the Bridge of Progress and discovers Echo's hoverboard on the ground, remarking on its ingenious design. Echo is sitting against the bridge's supports, clutching an injured leg. He recognizes Heimerdinger, asking what he's doing on this side of the bridge. Heimerdinger bemoans that after losing his counselorship, he wanted to offer Zaun his assistance, but that he's not welcome. Echo laughs, saying that he's having the exact same day. Heimerdinger tells Echo that his wounds look serious and that he requires medical attention. Echo replies that the professor is holding his ride. Jace meets Ambessa, who is enjoying a hot bath at a bathhouse. She strongly encourages him to build Hextech weaponry. Though he is initially dismissive of her advice, she seems to convince him of the real dangers posed by the Undercity and implores him to listen to the experience she has gained through age. The council convenes, processing the revelation that Marcus had been secretly working against them. Caitlyn and Vi arrive, informing the council that Silco is behind everything and is working to achieve Zaun's independence. Jace presents Jinx's grenade, asking who created it. Caitlyn hesitates, but Vi admits it was made by Jinx. Jace proposes the use of force, but the other counselors are unwilling to start a war until all diplomatic avenues have been exhausted. Vi angrily asserts that there can be no diplomacy with Silco, but the council is unwilling to listen, prompting Vi to storm out of the room. She walks out into the rain, but Caitlyn tries to stop her. Vi insists that their efforts to reach the council have failed and that she was naive to think things could change, but Caitlyn believes there must be another way. Vi compares Piltover and Zaun to oil and water, saying her relationship with Caitlyn is the same. She tells Caitlyn to forget about her and walks away. Victor stands at the docks and lets his crutch clatter to the ground. His bad lay has been completely transmuted into a purple metal. He begins to walk, and though he nearly stumbles, he breaks into a run, something he'd never been able to do before. Back at his lab, Victor prepares to continue transmuting himself into metal, carving runes all across his body. Meanwhile, Sky is approaching, nervously rehearsing ways to ask Victor to take a look at a project she'd been working on. Once again, Victor attempts to inject himself with shimmer, but after examining the vial, he realizes he's run out of shimmer. Victor slices his hand open, feeding his blood to the hex core, and attempts to go through with the procedure anyways. Sky walks in on him, shrieking in pain as the hex core violently transforms his flesh. She rushes to his side, attempting to pull him away, but the magic of the hex core disintegrates her into ash. Victor faints. He wakes up a short time later, only his hand having been transmuted. He sees that Sky has become a pile of dust on the ground and is heartbroken. In addition, the hex core has taken on a fleshier, more organic appearance. Jace begins forging a hextech weapon, what will eventually become the Mercury Hammer. Vi appears unannounced, and Jace threatens to have her arrested. She berates him for his readiness to throw strangers into a criminal justice system whose consequences he doesn't fully understand. However, they agree that they both want to make Silco pay. Vi dons one of the Atlas gauntlets. Despite being designed for mining, she seems to reckon that they would make decent weapons, likening them to Vander's gauntlets. She suggests that they go against the Council's wishes and attack Silco's shimmer manufacturing facilities. Later, a squad of enforcers helmed by Jace, now wielding the finished Mercury Hammer, board a train carrying numerous barrels of shimmer and force it back to its station. The enforcers quickly take control of the production facility and begin arresting workers, many of whom are children. One red-haired boy escapes an enforcer and presses a button triggering the alarm, waking up a squad of chemtanks, people in full-body mesh suits enhanced by shimmer. The chemtanks begin killing enforcers with superhuman speed and strength, eventually surrounding Jace. Vi appears wearing Atlas gauntlets on both hands and destroys a chemtank with one massive punch. Together, they begin dispatching the remaining chemtanks. Jace switches into can stance and fires furiously, but in his fervor he mistakenly strikes the red-haired boy. The child falls over a railing and plummets to the ground. A short time later, Jace and Vi find the boy just in time to watch him die. Caitlyn takes a shower, seemingly unable to take her thoughts away from Vi. Eventually, she emerges into the bathroom. Looking into the large, foggy mirror, she slowly realizes that someone has scribbled Jinx's trademark monkey symbol into the condensation. In the reflection, she sees that Jinx, eyes now pink from the effects of shimmer, is standing behind her. Jace quietly mourns the red-haired child. Vi attempts to console him, but Jace decides he won't be attacking any more of Silco's facilities. Vi protests. He commands her to return the Atlas gauntlets, but she refuses. He nearly attempts to seize the gauntlets by force, but simply walks away, saying she won't make it alone. Once he's gone, Vi destroys a large machine at the heart of the facility, spilling vast quantities of shimmer onto the ground. Some time later, Silco, Sevica, Rennie, and Finn examine the wreckage of the destroyed facility. Rennie hunches over the corpse of the red-haired child in grief. The boy was her son. The group bemoans Piltover's sudden boldness, saying that this never would have happened if Marcus was still alive. Rennie furiously condemns Silco for allowing this to happen, criticizing his over-reliance on Jinx, who killed Marcus in the first place. Finn gives Sevica a knowing glance, silently encouraging her once more to betray Silco. Victor grieves over Sky's remains, weeping and poring over the stack of notes she left behind. Eventually, he resolves to destroy the hex core, lifting a stool over his head with the intent to smash it. However, he finds himself unable to follow through. As he walks away, the hex core sends a pulse through his body that causes him to fall to the ground, seemingly of its own free will. Ambessa luxuriates on Mel's balcony, accompanied by a single guard and receiving a massage from her escort. Mel storms up to her and knocks the glass of wine from her hands, commanding the escort to leave. Ambessa dismisses him and the guard. Mel berates her mother for stirring Jace to violence. Ambessa informs her that the man who killed Mel's brother doesn't believe the score is settled, and that she came seeking to weaponize Hextech in order to protect herself and the Medarda family. Mel is appalled, insisting that she is no longer part of the family since Ambessa banished her, and asks why she did it. Ambessa confesses that Mel weakened her. She couldn't endure the look in her daughter's eyes when she made the necessary decisions to keep the family safe. She remains resolute in her quest to weaponize Hextech, offering to take Mel back home if she cooperates. Victor sits on the ledge overlooking the pool of water from his and Sky's childhood. He scatters her ashes, saying he's unsure where she would have preferred. He begins to walk away, but turns back, contemplating throwing himself from the edge. Jace interrupts. He reminisces about their time in the Distinguished Innovators competition, lamenting that everything made sense then. Victor pleads with Jace to destroy the hex core, saying that he's unable to do so himself. He ruminates on the terrible mistakes that the pair have made, saying that they need to make it right. Sevica, Finn, and Rennie barge into Silco's office. Finn lectures Silco for his decline, saying that today is the day he dies. Silco lectures him back, calling him a parasite and berating him for his lack of loyalty. A long, retractable blade emerges from Sevica's prosthetic arm, but instead of killing Silco as planned, she slices Finn's throat. Rennie flees in terror. Silco asks if Sevica had been tempted to kill him instead. She responds, not for a worm like him. Silco examines a letter on his desk, sent from Jace. Silco meets Jace on a rampart overlooking the ocean. He gives Jace a list of demands, including free trade routes, blanket amnesty, unrestricted access to the Hex Gates, and sovereignty. Jace balks at the list, retorting that Silco wouldn't stand a chance in a war between Piltover and Zaun, and claiming that he wants to save Zaun from annihilation. Silco refuses to budge, prompting Jace to make demands of his own, discontinuing the production of Shimmer, returning the Hex Crystal, and handing over Jinx. Silco's only problem is with surrendering Jinx, but Jace is adamant that if he complies, he'll have his nation of Zaun. Echo and Heimerdinger return to the Firelight's alcove. The professor is astonished at what Echo has accomplished in such a brief period, and Echo reveals his secret, saying, "It's not enough to give people what they need to survive. You have to give them what they need to live." Silco visits a statue of Vander, bemoaning that it all makes sense now. He grapples with an impossible choice between his dream of an independent Zaun and Jinx, whom he views as his daughter. Unbeknownst to him, Jinx stands behind the statue, listening to Silco's every word, enraged at the notion that Silco might betray her. Vi appears at the last drop, looking for Sevica. Sevica orders the bar's patrons to clear out, and moments later, Vi and Sevica are left alone. They fight for a long while, tearing up the bar in the process. Sevica reveals her blade, which is capable of firing heated waves of energy. Eventually, she pierces through one of the Atlas gauntlets, severely damaging it, and knocking Vi to the ground. Vi is nearly spent, but a memory of Vander convinces her to get back up again as she sheds the damaged gauntlet. As the pair continue to clash, Vi realizes that the gauntlets are capable of producing a magical force field. Sevika doesn't anticipate this, and it gives Vi a window to rip off Sevika's prosthetic arm off and finally knock her out. As Vi recovers, however, Jinx appears behind her, pistol whipping her unconscious. Victor accompanies Jace to a council meeting. Jace tells the council that he is not fit to govern the people of Zaun, nor are any of them. Victor announces that Jace has brokered a peace with Silco in exchange for the Undercity's independence. The other councilors, with the exception of Mel, are furious at the proposal, many leaping from their seats in indignation. Vi wakes up tied to a chair in Silco's old workshop, the abandoned cannery where Milo, Clagger, and Vander died. Jinx explains that, while Silco believes he created Jinx, it was actually Vi's voice in her head that drove her to become what she is now. Vi assures Jinx that the only thing that sustained her in prison was the thought of getting back to her, and promises that they're still sisters. Jinx brings Vi's chair to a dinner table and lights the candles, revealing a macabre mimicry of a lavish meal. Silco sits across from Vi, bound and gagged. Jinx's effigies of Milo and Clagger, as well as the stuffed bunny from their childhood, are also in attendance. Jinx berates Silco for his various lies and betrayals. She brings out a cupcake topped with a stolen hex crystal and wheels Caitlyn to the table, also bound and gagged. She states that Vi will decide where Jinx sits, referring to one chair labeled Powder and another labeled Jinx. She sets her shock pistol in Vi's bound hands, pleading that if Vi kills Caitlyn, she can have Powder back. Vi refuses, prompting Jinx to retake the gun and aim it at Caitlyn's head. Frantically, Vi promises to take Jinx away and leave all of this behind them. Silco attempts to speak, and Jinx removes his gag. He accuses Vi of lying and promises that he wasn't planning on betraying Jinx. Jinx hears Milo laughing and shoots the Milo dummy in response, breaking a glass. Caitlyn discreetly reaches for the broken glass, hoping to cut herself loose. Silco continues to speak, assuring Jinx that she's his daughter and that he'll never forsake her. Caitlyn breaks free. She picks up Pow Pow and aims it at Jinx, commanding her to drop the pistol. After much hesitation, Jinx places her gun on the table and puts her hands in the air, feigning surrender. Then, empowered by Shimmer with superhuman speed, she rushes Caitlyn, knocking her unconscious and seizing back Pow Pow. Vi pleads with Jinx to wake up, listing off the names of her family: Milo, Clagger, Vander, and their parents. However, this only serves to torment Jinx with twisted, monstrous hallucinations of the people she'd lost. Seeing how Vi is hurting Jinx, Silco furiously struggles to break his bonds. Finally, he grabs the shock pistol and takes aim at Vi, prompting Jinx to blindly fire Pow Pow at Silco, mortally wounding him with a bullet through the chest. Jinx hurries to Silco's side in tears, apologizing profusely. One final time, Silco promises he never would have betrayed her, telling her "you're perfect" before he dies. Vi attempts to comfort Jinx, but she stops crying and becomes stoic. Slowly, she walks to the chair labeled Jinx and sits down. She explains to Vi that the two of them will never be able to love each other like they used to. Then she takes the hex crystal and walks away. She loads the crystal into a massive rocket launcher, Fishbones, and fires a missile into the sky. Caitlyn wakes up, too late to stop her. Mel removes her family ring and votes for Jace's proposal. Sevika sits in Silco's office, recovering from her battle with Vi. Echo and Heimerdinger converse avidly. Singe fondles a locket containing an image of a young girl and looks up to see a bearded man hanging from the ceiling of his lab. Ambessa sees that Mel has vandalized her own painting of the immortal Bastion using gold paint. Caitlyn frees Vi and the pair watch in horror as the rocket sails through the sky. One by one, every counselor votes to support Jace's motion. Finally, the rocket crashes through the window of the council chambers.